Hello. Sorry I'm a little late. Approximately 2 minutes. I was playing Candy Crush and I got distracted. So I don't have any petitions right now for you, but I will put some in the discussion later. Discussion, you know what I'm trying to say. What am I trying to say? The comments? No. The description. I will put it in the description. That is the word I could not say. Yes, so I will put it in the description later, and we can all go sign those petitions, which will be wonderful and great. So yeah, I technically had my very last class today, and I'm finishing up my very last project. So school is out, which is kind of scary, because now we don't have anything to do except for protest and be active in creating a better world for ourselves and the people who come after us. So, with that, I will give you our quote of the day. When a question you may or may not, is this backwards for you when I show it to you? I can't tell. We're reading another quote from here. How to Be an Antiracist by Ibram X, Kendi. And there's also a really great, Oprah's doing like a great series. I think it's called like Where Do We Go From Here? But that's also a musical theater quote, so I could be wrong on that one. So let me find our quotes. Hello, where are you? Okay, there's another one in here, but I can't find it right now. Oh, it's down there. Okay, I found it. Okay. The first one is about what like assimilation is and what it asks of communities of color. Assimilationist, one who is expressing the racist idea that a racial group is culturally or behaviorally inferior and is supporting cultural or behavioral enrichment programs to quote-unquote develop that racial group. So that's our first quote to think about for today. And then I'll just get into it and see what happens to Frankenstein, the man with no plan. So yesterday, what happened was that Frankenstein finally got down to building this second creature. But then he was like, what if it's just like the first creature, but worse? Or what if the second creature doesn't like the first creature, and then I'm even more like screwed? So I don't know what to do. And then the creature appears at his window. He's like, I'm going to rip it apart. And so he destroys the second creature. And the creature is, of course, very upset by this. So the creature comes to him and is like, listen, asshole, I asked you to do one thing and you couldn't do it. So you know what? I'm going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And Frankenstein's like, who, me? And it's like, yes, Frankenstein, you did this. So then he's like going to leave his little island that he's been living in Scotland or something like that. So he's like, all right, it's time for me to go. It's time for me to leave this island. And then he's like, oof, I should probably take away the body parts that I've left in my little hut so that the poor little villagers who I'm renting this hut from don't have to find it. So off he goes in his little skiff. He skiffs out to the middle of the ocean. He throws the body parts into the ocean. He's like, cool. And then he's like, you know what? In the middle of the ocean is a vast and unpredictable creature. I'm going to take a nap. And so he takes a nap and he wakes up and he's like, where am I? And then he's like, I don't know where I am. I'm in the middle of the goddamn ocean. And so he's like, I'm going to die. And then he's like, at last the creature's wish will be fulfilled. It's like, ugh, Frankenstein. So he's super moody boy. And then he like pulls up on shore. He's like, oh, thank God. Like, oh, they're speaking English. Oh, of course they will love me. They will help me. And the people on the shore are like, hey, you want to talk about the murder that happened here last night? And Frankenstein's like, pourquoi? So basically Frankenstein's like, and this is the most horrific part of my tale. It's like, Frankenstein, get over yourself. So that's what we're going to talk about today in Frankenstein. Let's see what's happening to Mr. Fiddlesticks. Let's rename Frankenstein and not the creature. All right. Frankenstein Chapter 4. I was soon introduced into the presence of the magistrate, an old benevolent man with calm and mild manners. He looked upon me, however, with some degree of severity, and then, turning towards my conductors, he asked who appeared as witness on this occasion. About half a dozen men came forward, and one being selected by the magistrate, he deposed that he had been out fishing the night before with his son and brother-in-law, Daniel Nugent, when about 10 o'clock they observed a strong northerly blast rising, and they accordingly put in for port. It was a very dark night, as the moon had not yet risen. They did not land at the harbor, but as they had been accustomed, at a creek about 2 miles below. He walked on first, carrying a part of the fishing tackle, and his companions followed him at some distance. As he was proceeding along the sands, he struck his foot against something, and fell all his length on the ground. His companions came up to assist him, and by the light of their lantern they found that he had fallen on the body of a man who was to all appearances dead. Their first suspicion was that it was the corpse of some person who had been drowned and was thrown on the shore by the waves, but upon examination they found that the clothes were not wet, and that even the body was not then cold. They instantly carried it to the cottage of an old woman who near the spot, and endeavored, but in vain, to restore it to life. He appeared to be a handsome young man, about 25 years of age. He had apparently been strangled, for there were no signs of violence, except the black mark of fingers on his neck. The first part of this deposition did not in the least interest me, but when the mark of fingers was mentioned, I remembered the murder of my brother, and felt myself extremely agitated. My limbs trembled, and a mist came over my eyes, which obliged me to lean on a chair for support. The magistrate observed me with a keen eye, and of course drew an unfavorable jury from my manner. It's spelled A-U-G-U-R-Y, and I don't have the faintest idea how to pronounce that. The son confirmed his father's account, but when Daniel Nugent was called, he swore positively that, just before the fall of his companion, he saw a boat with a single man in it at a short distance from the shore, and, as far as he could judge by the light of a few stars, it was the same boat in which I had just landed. A woman deposed that she lived near the beach and was standing at the door of her cottage waiting for the return of the fishermen, about an hour before she heard the discovery of the body, when she saw a boat, with only one man in it, push off from that part of the shore where the corpse was afterwards found. Another woman confirmed the account of the fishermen having brought the body into her house. It was not cold. They put it into a bed and rubbed it, and Daniel went to the town for an apothecary, but life was quite gone. Several other men were examined concerning my landing, and they agreed that, with the strong north wind that had arisen during the night, it was very probable that I had beaten about for many hours, and had been obliged to return nearly to the same spot from which I had departed. Besides, they observed that it appeared that I had brought the body from another place, and it was likely that I did not appear to know the shore. I might have put into the harbor ignorant of the distance of the town of something, from the place where I had deposited the corpse. Mr. Kerwin, on hearing this evidence, desired that I should be taken into the room. Sorry, there's sometimes when I eat almonds, I can feel the husk, the nut husk in my throat. And I haven't eaten any almonds, and yet I still feel the husk of the nut. Okay, hopefully that has dispelled it. Mr. Kerwin, on hearing this evidence, desired that I should be taken into the room where the body lay for an interment, that it might be observed what effect the sight of it would produce upon me. This idea was probably suggested by the extreme agitation I had exhibited when the mode of the murder had been described. I was accordingly conducted by the magistrate and several other persons to the inn. I could not help being struck by the strange coincidences that had taken place during this eventful night, but, knowing that I had been conversing with several persons in the island I had inhabited about the time the body had been found, I was perfectly tranquil as to the consequences of the affair.
I entered the room where the corpse lay, and was led up to the coffin. How can I describe my sensations on beholding it? I feel yet parched with horror, nor can I reflect on that terrible moment without shuddering and agony that faintly reminds me of the anguish of the recognition. The trial, the presence of the magistrate and witnesses, passed like a dream from my memory when I saw the lifeless form of Henry Clerval stretched before me. I gasped for breath, and throwing myself on the body, I exclaimed, "Have my murderous machinations deprived you also, my dearest Henry, of life? 2 I have already destroyed, other victims await their destiny, but you, Clerval, my friend, my benefactor." The human frame could no longer support the agonizing suffering that I endured, and I was carried out of the room in strong convulsions. That's a really strong statement for your innocence, my dude. A fever succeeded to this. I lay for 2 months on the point of death. My ravings, as I afterwards heard, were frightful. I called myself the murderer of William, of Justine, and of Clerval. Sometimes I entreated my attendants to assist me in the destruction of the fiend by whom I was tormented, and at others I felt the fingers of the monster already grasping my neck, and screamed aloud with agony and terror. Fortunately, as I spoke my native language, Mr. Kerwin alone understood me, but my gestures and bitter cries were sufficient to affright the other witnesses. Why did I not die? More miserable than man ever was before, why did I not sink into forgetfulness and rest? Death snatches away many blooming children, the only hopes of their doting parents. How many brides and youthful lovers have been one day in the bloom of health and hope, and the next a prey for worms and the decay of the tomb? Of what materials was I made that I could thus resist so many shocks, which, like the turning of the wheel, continually renewed the torture? But I was doomed to live, and in 2 months found myself as awaking from a dream in a prison, stretched on a wretched bed, surrounded by, what the hell, gaolers? It's spelled Gaolers. I know this is what you wanted, a spelling lesson, but it's what you're getting. Gaolers, turnkeys, bolts, and all the miserable apparatus of a dungeon. It was morning, I remember, when I thus awoke to understanding. I had forgotten the particulars of what had happened, and only felt as if some great misfortune had suddenly overwhelmed me. But when I looked around and saw the barred windows and the squalidness of the room in which I was, all flashed across my memory, and I groaned bitterly. The sound disturbed an old woman who was sleeping in a chair beside me. She was a hired nurse, the wife of one of the turnkeys, and her countenance expressed all those bad qualities which often characterize that class. Come on, man. Come on. The lines of her face were hard and rude, like that of persons accustomed to see without sympathizing in sights of misery. Her tone expressed her entire indifference. She addressed me in English, and the voice struck me as the one I had heard during my sufferings. "Are you better now, sir?" said she. I replied in the same language with a feeble voice. "I believe I am, but if it be all true, if indeed I did not dream, I am sorry that I am still alive to feel this misery and horror." "For that matter," replied the old woman, "if you mean about the gentleman you murdered, I believe that it were better for you if you were dead, for I fancy it will go hard with you, but you will be hung when the next sessions come on. However, that's none of my business. I am sent to nurse you and get you well. I do my duty with a safe conscience. It were well if everybody did the same." I turned with loathing from the woman who could utter so unfeeling a speech to a person just saved, on the very edge of death. But I felt languid and unable to reflect on all that had passed. The whole series of my life appeared to me as a dream. I sometimes doubted if indeed it were all true, for it never presented itself to my mind with the force of reality. All these images that floated before me became more distinct. I grew feverish. A darkness pressed around me. No one was near me who soothed me with the gentle voice of love. No dear hand supported me. The physician came and prescribed medicines, and the old woman prepared them for me. But utter carelessness was visible in the first, and the expression of brutality was strongly marked in the visage of the second. Who could be interested in the fate of a murderer but the hangman who would gain his fee? These were my first reflections, but I soon learned that Mr. Kerwin had shown me extreme kindness. He had caused the best room in the prison to be prepared for me. Is that an oxymoron? Wretched indeed was the best, and it was he who had provided a physician and a nurse. It is true, he seldom came to see me. Dude, like, this is all you can ask for right now, my man. Hello, Shiv. Frankenstein has been imprisoned, and the person who died is, drum roll please, Clerval. And so Frankenstein fell into like a fever for 2 months, and is just now waking up and figuring out what's going on. Where was I? It is true, he seldom came to see me, for although he ardently desired to relieve the sufferings of every human creature, he did not wish to abolish the prison system entirely. Mr. Kerwin is not an ally. Where was I? She desired to relieve the sufferings of every human creature. He did not wish to be present at the agonies and miserable ravings of a murderer. He came, therefore, sometimes to see that I was not neglected, but his visits were short and at long intervals. One day, when I was gradually recovering, I was seated in a chair, my eyes half open, and my cheeks livid like those in death. I was overcome by gloom and misery, and often reflected I had better seek death than remain miserably pent up only to be let loose in a world replete with wretchedness. Wow. At one time I considered whether I should not declare myself guilty and suffer the penalty of the law, less innocent than poor Justine had been. Such were my thoughts when the door of my apartment was opened and Mr. Kerwin entered. His countenance expressed sympathy and compassion. Excuse me. He drew a chair close to mine and addressed me in French. I can't. I fear this. Oh dear. I don't like where I'm going with this. Oh, my hands are all sweaty today. I know I had a good voice for him yesterday and now it's gone. I fear this place is very shocking to you. Can I do anything to make you more comfortable? I thank you, but all that you mention is nothing to me. On the whole earth there is no comfort which I am capable of receiving. I know that the sympathy of a stranger can be but of little relief to one borne down as you are by so strange a misfortune. But you will, I hope, soon quit this melancholy abode, for doubtless evidence can easily be brought to free you from the criminal charge. That is my least concern. I am, by a course of strange events, become most miserable of mortals. Persecuted and tortured as I am, and have been, can death be any evil to me? You're the most miserable of mortals? Okay. Okay. Nothing can be more unfortunate and agonizing than the strange chances that have lately occurred. You were thrown by some surprising accident on this shore, renowned for its hospitality, seized immediately, and charged with murder. The first sight that was presented to your eyes was the body of your friend, murdered in so unaccountable a manner, and placed, as it were, by some fiend across your path. As Mr. Kerwin said this, notwithstanding the agitation I endured on this retrospect of my sufferings, I also felt considerable surprise at the knowledge he seemed to possess concerning me. I suppose some astonishment was exhibited in my countenance, for Mr. Kerwin hastened to say, and I'm going to change his voice because I don't like what I'm doing with it. It was not until a day. I don't like that either. You know what? Whatever. I'm just going to write this. I'm just going to write that. Wait. It was not until a day or two after your illness that I thought of examining your dress, that I might discover some trace by which I could send to your relations an account of your misfortune and illness. I found several letters, and among others, one which I discovered from its commencement to be from your father. I instantly wrote to Geneva. Nearly 2 months have elapsed since the departure of my letter. But you are ill. Even now you tremble. You are unfit for agitation of any kind. This suspense is 1,000 times worse than the most horrible event. Tell me what new scene of death has been acted, and whose murder I am now to lament. Your family is perfectly well, said Mr. Kerwin with gentleness, and someone, a friend, is come to visit you. I know not by what chain of thought the idea presented itself, but it instantly darted into my mind that the murderer had come to mock at my misery, and taunt me with the death of Clerval as a new incitement for me to comply with his hellish desires. I put my hand before my eyes and cried out in agony, "Oh, take him away! I cannot see him! For God's sake, do not let him enter!" Mr. Kerwin regarded me with a troubled countenance. He could not help regarding my exclamation as a presumption of my guilt, and said in a rather severe tone, "I should have thought, young man, that the presence of your father would have been welcome, instead of inspiring such violent repugnance." "My father," cried I, with every feature and every muscle, while every feature and every muscle was relaxed from anguish to pleasure. "Is my father indeed come? How kind, how very kind. But where is he? Why does he not hasten to me?" Well, maybe because you just yelled at him and told him to go away. My change of manner surprised and pleased the magistrate. Perhaps he thought that my former exclamation was a momentary return of delirium, and now he instantly resumed his former benevolence. He rose and quitted the room with my nurse, and in a moment my father entered it. Nothing at this moment could have given me greater pleasure than the arrival of my father. I stretched out my hand to him and cried, "Are you then safe? And Elizabeth? And Ernest?" My father calmed me with assurances of their welfare, and endeavored, by dwelling on these subjects so interesting to my heart, to raise my desponding spirits, but he soon felt that a prison cannot be the abode of cheerfulness. "What a place is this that you inhabit, my son?" said he, looking mournfully at the barred windows and wretched appearance of the room. "You travelled to seek happiness, but fatality seems to pursue you. And poor Clerval." The name of my unfortunate and murdered friend was an agitation too great to be endured in my weak state. I shed tears. "Alas, yes, my father," replied I. "Some destiny of the most horrible kind hangs over me, called my own creation. And I must live to fulfill it, or surely I should have died on the coffin of Henry." We were not allowed to converse for any length of time, for the precarious state of my health rendered every precaution necessary that could ensure tranquillity. Mr. Kerwin came in and insisted that my strength should not be exhausted by too much exertion. But the appearance of my father was to me like that of my good angel, and I gradually recovered my health. As my sickness quitted me, I was absorbed by a gloomy and black melancholy that nothing could dissipate. The image of Clerval was forever before me, ghastly and murdered. More than once, good God, how long is this guy gonna talk? More than once, the agitation into which these reflections threw me made my friends dread a dangerous relapse. Alas, why did they preserve so miserable and detested a life? It was surely that I might fulfill my destiny, which is now drawing to a close. Soon, oh, very soon, will death extinguish these throbbings, and relieve me from the mighty weight of anguish that bears me to the dust. And in executing the award of justice, I shall also sink to rest. Then the appearance of death was distant, although the wish was ever present to my thoughts, and I often sat for hours motionless and speechless, wishing for some mighty revolution that might bury me and my destroyer in its ruins. The season of the assizes approached. I had already been 3 months in prison, and although I was still weak and in continual danger of relapse, I was obliged to travel nearly 100 miles to the country town where the court was held. Mr. Kerwin charged himself with every care of collecting witnesses and arranging my defense. I was spared the disgrace of appearing publicly as a criminal, as the case was not brought before the court that decides on life and death. Why? Why do you guys I guess he was probably, the fact that he was probably so shocked upon viewing the body that he felt, I guess that was enough to prove him not guilty. Okay. The grand jury rejected the bill, and it's being proved that I was on the Orkney Islands at the hour of the body of my friend was found, and a fortnight after my removal, I was liberated from prison. My father was, okay, so they did have witnesses. My father was enraptured on finding me freed from the vexations of a criminal charge. I love that. Vexations of a criminal charge. Ooh, it was just a vex.
That's just vexing. That's not the prison system.
That I was again allowed to breathe the fresh atmosphere and allowed to return to my native country. I did not participate in these feelings, for to me the walls of a dungeon or a palace were alike hateful. The cup of life was poisoned forever, and although the sun shone upon me, as upon the happy and gay of heart, I saw around me nothing but a dense and frightful darkness, penetrated by no light but the glimmer of two eyes that glared upon me. Sometimes they were the expressive eyes of Henry, languishing in death, the dark orbs nearly covered by the lids, and the long black lashes that fringed them. Sometimes it was the watery, clouded eyes of the monster, as I first saw them in my chamber at Ingolstadt. My father tried to awaken in me the feelings of affection. He talked of Geneva, which I should soon visit, of Elizabeth and Ernest, but these words only drew deep groans from me. Sometimes, indeed, I felt a wish for happiness, and thought with melancholy delight of my beloved cousin, or longed with a devouring, melody du pays, to see once more the blue lake and rapid Rhone. I think it's supposed to be Rhine. That had been so dear to me in early childhood, but my general state of feeling was a torpor, in which a prison was as welcome at a residence as the divinest scene in nature, and these fits were seldom interrupted but by paroxysms of anguish and despair. At these moments I often endeavored to put an end to the existence I loathed, and it required unceasing attendance and vigilance to restrain from me committing some dreadful act of violence. I remember as I quitted the prison, I heard one of the men say, "He may be innocent of the murder, but he has certainly a bad conscience." These words struck me. A bad conscience? Oh, good God. Yes, surely I had one. William, Justine, and Clerval had died through my infernal machinations. And whose death, cried I, is to finish the tragedy? Ah, my father, do not remain in this wretched country. Take me where I may forget myself, my existence in all the world. I don't think that's how it's going to work out for you, buddy. I don't think forgetting is, because every time you try to forget, somebody dies. My father easily acceded to my desire, and after having taken leave of Mr. Kerwin, we hastened to Dublin. I felt as if I was relieved from a heavy weight. In a typical fashion, I felt bad for a couple of minutes, and then I figured my shit out. I felt as if I was relieved from a heavy weight when the packet sailed with a fair wind from Ireland, and I had quitted forever the country which had been to me the scene of so much misery. Victor, what? You've just been spreading havoc across all of Europe. Okay. I lost it. Sleep, sleep. Okay, there it is. It was midnight. My father slept in the cabin, and I lay on the deck looking at the stars and listening to the dashing of the waves. I hailed the darkness that shut Ireland from my sight, and my pulse beat with a feverish joy when I reflected that I should soon see Geneva. The past appeared to me in the light of a frightful dream, yet the vessel in which I was, the wind that blew me from the detested shore of Ireland, and the sea which surrounded me, told me too forcibly that I was deceived by no vision, and that Clerval, my friend and dearest companion, had fallen a victim to me and the monster of my creation. I repassed in my memory my whole life, my quiet happiness while residing with my family in Geneva, the death of my mother, and my departure for Ingolstadt. I remember shuddering at the mad enthusiasm that hurried me on to the creation of my hideous enemy, and I called to mind the night during which he first lived. I was unable to pursue the train of thought. 1,000 feelings pressed upon me, and I wept bitterly. Ever since my recovery from the fever I had been in, the custom of taking every night a small quantity of laudanum. I'm pretty sure that's some sort of opiate. But correct me. For it was by means of this drug only that I was enabled to gain the rest necessary for the preservation of life. Oppressed by the recollection of my various misfortunes, I now took a double dose, and soon slept profoundly. But sleep did not afford me respite from thought and misery. My dreams presented 1,000 objects that scared me. Towards morning, I was possessed by a kind of nightmare. I felt the fiend's grasp in my neck, and I could not free myself from it. Groans and cries rung in my ears. My father, who was watching over me, perceiving my restlessness, awoke me and pointed to the port of Holyhead, which we were now entering. And that is the chapter. Wow. Chapters are getting longer. No, maybe not. Good Lord. Okay, I might have to split. Interesting. Are you asking me how I've been? Or who has been? I might have to split the last chapter into two because it's like 11. Me. I've been okay. I've been really stressed because, as you guys know, I was protesting, and then now I'm just stressed that I have COVID and might be passing it to my family. So stressed all the time. But I'm gonna go get a CVS test tomorrow, and then I have so hopefully I'll be less stressed. And I don't have a place to live next year either. I'm still looking for that. So if I could not have COVID and have a place to live next school year, I would be greatly relieved. But till then, and I'm sure I'll find something to obsess over in the meantime. How have you been, Shiv? And I don't know if I can have that. We can have that conversation via live chat, but I'll send you a loving message afterwards. Okay. I wish you all health and happiness. I will give you our final quote of today, which I have trouble finding. Okay, there we are. And again, this quote is about like assimilationist ideas. So, that's exactly the first two words. Assimilationist ideas are racist ideas. Assimilationists can position any racial group as the superior standard that another racial group should be measuring themselves against, the benchmark they should be trying to reach. Assimilationists typically position white people as the superior standard. So that was a... Ooh! Okay. I'm gonna put that one down. I've heard that one posited a couple times. I'm trying to decide what I read. Okay. Our prisons. Wonderful. I'm going to do that one, and I also want to get the new Jim Crow. That's one that I want to read. Let's dismantle the system. Let's dismantle it. Thank you for the book rec. Okie dokie, y'all. Thanks for coming in today. Tomorrow is Thursday. Okay, we're good. So I'll be in at 1. I was just thinking, but then I finished my thought. Yes, tomorrow's Thursday. I'll be in at 1. See you soon. Love you loads. Let's finish this book. Let's see what happens to Frankie boy. All right. Goodbye. Thanks for tuning in. See you soon. Goodbye.